Thank you very much, Maggie. And let me extend a very warm welcome to all of you, dear ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your interest. And thanks very much to the organizers, the Adam Smith Institute and the Institute of Economic Affairs, who made possible the Freedom Week 2024 at the University of Cambridge. Thomas Jefferson, he once said, "Freedom is lost gradually from uninterested, uninformed, and uninvolved people." You guys, however, make sure that people remain interested, informed, and involved. And the importance of your work for our individual freedoms and liberty cannot be overestimated. And I would like to thank you very much for your great work. As Maggie said, the title of my talk is Denationalisation of Money, and it refers to a book written by the Austrian economist Friedrich August von Hayek in 1976. Hayek was born in 1899 in Vienna, Austria, taught in the United Kingdom and the United States of America, received the Nobel Prize of Economics in 1974 together with Gunnar Myrdal, and died in 1992 in Freiburg. Friedrich August von Hayek stood in the tradition of the so-called Austrian School of Economics and as such had a great interest in monetary theory. Especially in his later works, Hayek became increasingly critical of the idea that the government or the state should hold the monopoly of money production. In his Denationalisation of Money, Hayek noted, and I quote, "Practically all governments of history have used their exclusive power to issue money in order to defraud and plunder the people." And in a 1984 interview, Hayek said, and you find that on YouTube, basically became a bit more explicit, saying that, "I don't believe we shall ever have good money again before we take the thing out of the hands of government. If we can't take it violently out of the hands of government, then all we can do is by some sly roundabout may introduce something that they can't stop." I would like to say that Hayek might have been delighted had he known about crypto markets back in 1984. In what follows, I will first outline some fundamental theoretical insights about money. Second, explain the problems that are associated with today's so-called fiat money. And against this backdrop, third, explain Hayek's case for denationalizing money production, and that means allowing for a free market in money. And I hope you find that very interesting and very exciting, and I hope I've been in a position to show you the link between the quality of money and our freedoms. Before I start, I would like to give you some literature on the topic at hand. And to start with, there's Hayek's Denationalisation of Money, but also you might be interested in an earlier version of Hayek's study titled Currency Choice, A Way to Stop Inflation, and he published this little booklet in 1975. I also refer you to the work of Ludwig von Mises and Murray Rothbard on money and free banking. Also of interest could be my critique of some of Hayek's more technical considerations. I did that in 2016. And finally, L.J. Sechrest's free banking theory history and a laissez-faire model from 1993 might also be insightful reading for you. But now let us start with some fundamentals of money theory. What is money? The answer is that money is the most widely accepted means of exchange. It is the most liquid good, the most marketable good available. Money is neither a consumption good nor is it a capital or production good. Money is a good sui generis. It is the exchange good in the economy. You probably know that there are three functions of money, namely means of exchange function, unit of account function, store of value function. That is what you find in the textbook. However, upon closer inspection, the Austrian economist Ludwig von Mises argued that money has only one function, namely the means of exchange function. The unit of account function and the store of value function are merely sub-functions of the means of exchange function. And indeed, the unit of account function is only an expression of the means of exchange function. It describes the exchange ratio between the monetary units that must be surrendered to obtain a good in question. Say you have to pay $100 for a shirt. And the store of value function merely represents a postponement of money's exchange function from the present into the future. And if we all agree that money has only one function, namely the means of exchange function, we come to a rather startling insight. Namely, that it does not matter how much money there is in the economy. A money supply of 25 trillion US dollars is as good or as bad as a money supply as, say, 5 trillion US dollars. If the quantity of money is large, goods prices will be relatively high. And if the quantity of money is relatively low, goods prices will also be relatively low. Again, any quantity of money is just as good or bad for financing a given transaction of goods and services as any other. We can conclude that if money is useful only for exchange, an increase in the quantity of money will bring no social benefit. It will not bring a social benefit if we increase the money supply in the economy. Some people benefit, but only at the expense of many others. But there is no social benefit coming from an increase in the quantity of money that would be beneficial to all people in the economy. An increase in the quantity of money only lowers the purchasing power of the money unit compared to a situation in which the quantity of money in the economy had remained constant. What about the value of money, or the purchasing power of money, I should say? As noted earlier, money is a good like any other. It is only special in the sense that it is the most liquid, the most marketable good around. And as a good, its value is determined by the so-called law of diminishing marginal utility. Some of you who study economics might have heard about this law. And in a nutshell, this law says that the more money units I get, the lower the marginal utility of the money unit becomes relative to the value of other vendible items. In other words, the more money units are available, the lower will be their purchasing power. Another important insight is that an increase in the quantity of money necessarily leads to a redistribution of income and wealth. The first recipients of the new money benefit at the expense of the later recipients. That is quite interesting. The first recipients can spend their new money on goods and services at unchanged prices. As the money, the newly created money, moves from hand to hand, so to speak, goods prices rise, so the late receivers of the new money can buy goods and services only at elevated prices. This is the so-called Cantillon effect, named after an Irish-French economist in the 18th century. In other words, an increase in the quantity of money in an economy is never neutral. It creates winners, namely the first receivers of the newly created money, and losers, that are the late receivers of the newly created money. If you look back in history, we find that people, whenever they had the freedom to choose their money, preferred precious metals, namely gold and silver in particular. The reason is obvious. To serve as money, the good in question must have certain properties. It must be scarce, it must be durable, it must be highly divisible, it must be portable, it must be storable, it must have a high value per unit of weight, to name just a few qualities. And because gold and silver are supremely money-like commodities, they were chosen by the free supply and demand in the markets as money when they were available. Just look into history books. You always find gold and silver, sometimes copper, served as money, were freely chosen money. Now you may ask, why are we no longer using gold and silver as money? But you may ask, why are we no longer using gold and silver as money? Let me try to provide you with a short answer. By the last quarter of the 19th century, most countries had eventually adopted gold as a means of payment. This means, at least in theory, that people in their daily transactions use gold coins as well as banknotes and bank deposit money, which were all redeemable into physical gold at the issuing bank. At the beginning of World War I, however, many countries ended the gold redeemability of their currencies, like Austria and the German Reich, for instance, and even Great Britain. Why? Well, governments wanted to finance their wartime expenditures by means of the inflation tax. That is, by issuing unbacked paper money. And so they severed the link between physical gold and the currency they printed. The result was high inflation, in some countries even hyperinflation, like, say, in Germany, in Austria, in Hungary. After the war ended in 1918, most nations failed to return to gold money. Great Britain went off the gold standard in 1931. The big exception was the US. Even in World War I, the US dollar had kept its gold backing. In 1944, 44 nations signed the Bretton Woods Agreement, which took effect after the end of World War II in 1945. The Bretton Woods system made the US dollar the world's reserve currency, replacing the British pound. 35 US dollars were equivalent to 1 ounce of gold. 1 ounce is 31.100 grams. The Bretton Woods system was not a gold standard. It was something like a pseudo or fake gold standard. But it worked, at least initially. The reason it eventually collapsed was that the Americans didn't play by the rules. They kept issuing more and more US dollars that were not backed by physical gold. People worldwide lost faith in the promise that the US could redeem the greenback for the yellow metal. As more and more nations rushed to exchange their US dollars for gold at the New York Federal Reserve, the US gold stock dwindled and the US ran the risk of defaulting on its gold payment obligations. On August 15, 1971, US President Richard Nixon took decisive action. He announced that the US dollar would no longer be redeemable into gold. This unilateral decision by Nixon brought the world an unbacked paper money, or so-called fiat money, system. Nixon's decision actually amounted to the greatest act of monetary expropriation in modern history. And it brought us the fiat money problem that still haunts us today. The US economist Milton Friedman, who also got the Nobel Prize of Economics in 1976, put it quite diplomatically. Quote, "A world monetary system has emerged that has no historical precedents. A system in which every major currency in the world is on an irredeemable paper money standard. The ultimate consequences of this development are shrouded in uncertainty." As Friedman insinuated, today's worldwide paper or fiat money regime is indeed economically and socially highly problematic, with negative consequences that extend beyond what most people would imagine. Fiat money can be characterized by 3 factors. Number 1, it is money monopolized by the state and its central bank. Number 2, fiat money is created through bank lending. It is created out of thin air. Number 3, fiat money is dematerialized money in the form of colorful paper tickets and bits and bytes on computer hard drives. Now, fiat money is inflationary. It loses its purchasing power over time. And I think most of you make the experience that things become more expensive over time. And that is the evidence of what I'm just saying. Fiat money is inflationary. Fiat money benefits a few at the expense of many others. So we can say that fiat money is socially unjust. As I said earlier, the first receivers are the beneficiaries. Those who don't get any additional newly created money, they don't benefit from the system. Fiat money causes boom and bust cycles. It sets into motion an artificial economic upswing followed by a crash. You remember 2008, 2009, the global financial crisis. That was a pretty good example of what the fiat money system does in terms of causing boom and bust. Fiat money also leads to over-indebtedness. It is created through bank credit expansion. So whenever a bank issues a loan to a consumer or a company, it creates additional money. And unfortunately, the economy's debt burdens outpaces their income growth. Fiat money allows the state to become ever bigger and more powerful at the expense of civil liberties and freedom. It also helps financing war at relatively low political costs. So you could even say fiat money is the money for war. And it is in this context, I think, that the issue of central bank digital currency must be addressed. I think you have heard about the idea of central bank digital currencies, CBDC as they are called. The need for a centralized digital means of payment is one of the main official arguments for why central banks should issue digital central bank currency. However, the truth might be somewhat different. By issuing central bank digital currencies, central banks want first and foremost to uphold their fiat money monopoly. They do not want private monies, be that Bitcoin or Ethereum, to compete with the official fiat currencies. This is problematic, given that there are quite a few issues with central bank digital currencies, which I think tend to be neglected or overlooked in the current debate. First, central bank digital currencies are not better monies. They represent fiat monies. As such, fiat central bank digital currencies suffer from the same economic and ethical defects as analog and electronic fiat monies. Second, central bank digital currencies will most likely replace cash or allow governments to phase out coins and notes. And so people will most likely lose their only means of making anonymous payments, and what little is left of their financial privacy will be gone. Third, without cash you no longer can withdraw your money from the banking system. It can be expropriated through negative interest rates imposed by the central bank. Fourth, as central bank digital currencies become increasingly accepted, they can easily be instrumentalized for further political purposes. Just think of China's social credit system. Imagine, if you will, only getting access to central bank digital currency if you comply with the government's directives or comply with the wishes of those interest or special interest groups that determine the government's orders. If you don't, you suffer disadvantages. You will no longer be able to travel to Cambridge University, to the Freedom Week, order certain newspapers or books, or buy groceries. Your accounts may be frozen and your money even confiscated if you dare dissent too much with the government's directives. The list of such anti-freedom atrocities that become a possibility in a world of central bank digital currencies goes on, and it should make us at least become hesitant to support the idea of central banks issuing central bank digital currencies. Against the backdrop of the existing fiat money regime and its problems, the question arises, why not end the fiat money regime and replace it with a better system? This is what Friedrich August von Hayek proposed in his Denationalisation of Money, published in 1976, to put an end to the state's or government's monopoly of money production, that is, denationalising money, replacing it by a free market in money. Now you may ask, how would a free market in money work? I guess most of you like free choice when buying, say, food, sports shoes, books, computers, furniture, cars, etc. And I guess it doesn't take much to convince you that a free market caters best to the needs of the consumers, providing them with goods of the highest quality at the lowest possible price. But when it comes to money, people may be asking themselves, how could a free market in money possibly work? Well, it would work like any free market. People making exchanges would preferably use that type of medium of exchange that is most widely accepted, that has the highest marketability. I, for instance, would seek to get hold of a medium which is, from the viewpoint of my trading partner, say a baker, most highly valued. And my baker, in turn, would seek to hold a medium of exchange that can be most easily be exchanged at, say, the shoemaker, and so on. In other words, in a free market in money, it would be the demand for money that determines what money is. The money users would actually decide what money is. It is the people in the free marketplace that make this choice, not the government, not any special interest group. What kind of medium would be chosen as money? People will demand good or sound money, I assume. And sound money has certain characteristics. We just talked about it. For instance, sound money is scarce, homogeneous, durable, divisible, mintable, transportable. It must represent a relatively high exchange value per unit, etc. When we look into monetary history, we see that people mostly, if they had the freedom to do so, opted for precious metals as money, preferably gold and silver, even copper to a degree, but not unbacked paper money, because precious metals were, from the viewpoint of money users, considered the best option. Of course, we wouldn't know what kind of money would emerge if we open up a free market in money As you know, the free market is a discovery process. That is something Hayek always stressed. However, in view of what we have just said, it is highly likely that people would, if we open up a free market in money across the globe, it's very likely that people would opt for gold and silver, perhaps for a crypto unit such as Bitcoin. Wouldn't result a free market in money in chaos, as hundreds, even thousands or millions of monies would compete with each other? The answer is no. The reason is that the optimal number, that's very important to think about, that the optimal number of monies in this world is 1. If all people use the same money, money's productive benefits are maximized. That said, a free market in money would sooner or later come up with a single money, proper. And what is more, it is important to distinguish between money proper and money substitutes. In a free market in money, people with free choice would decide what goods will become money proper, such as gold or silver or a crypto unit. Then people will most likely demand services of so-called money warehouses, or banks for that matter. Money warehouses would spring up, offering services in terms of storage, settlement, and safeguarding money proper holdings. If, for instance, Mr. Smith decides to deposit 10 gold ounces with a money warehouse, he will receive in return a money warehouse receipt. That is a so-called money substitute. And it says, whoever holds this kind of piece of paper, or maybe it's on your iPhone, if you show it at the money warehouse, you can exchange the paper slip or claim into a certain amount of physical gold. Money warehouses will compete in terms of money substitutes, not in money proper. And let me just sum up here. In a truly free market in money, people freely choose the kind of money they wish to use. And once this has been decided, the remaining competition is among money substitutes issued by competing money warehouses. From an economic point of view, the current state of monetary affairs in this world is rather unsatisfactory, to put it mildly. Our fiat monies are inflationary, socially unjust, they cause crises and lead to over-indebtedness, and they allow the states to become bigger and more powerful at the expense of civil and entrepreneurial freedoms and liberties. And don't we forget, fiat money is the money of war. It is against this backdrop that there are important lessons that can be learned from Hayek's Denationalisation of Money. Number 1, Hayek reminds us that there is no compelling economic or ethical reason why the state should hold the money monopoly. In fact, that providing the state, and thus the special interest groups that use the state's coercive power for their own purposes, with the authority over money will lead to inflation and its accompanying economic and societal evils. Number 2, Hayek rightfully points out that a free market for money is possible, and that it is, no doubt about that, economically and ethically superior to today's states-controlled fiat money monopoly regimes. Number 3, Hayek brings to our attention what Karl Menger, the founder of the Austrian School of Economics, had pointed out already in his book Principles of Economics in 1871, namely that money is a free market phenomenon, that it emerged spontaneously from the free market and out of a commodity, such as gold and silver. This is an important insight that should make us understand better the developments in the crypto markets. Against this backdrop, I think it's important to remind us of the work of Karl Menger. And according to Karl Menger, money did not, and Ludwig von Mises explained this in 1912 with his regression theorem, through state action. It did not and does not require a state as we know it today for money coming into existence. We have good reason to expect that a free market in money will work just fine. And finally, number 4, a free market in money can be set into motion by, number 1, ending the legal tender status of official currencies. Number 2, ending capital gain taxes and VAT on potential money candidates, such as gold, silver, and crypto units. And C, ending all remaining regulation that stands in the way of using other means for payments than official currencies. A free market in money, dear ladies and gentlemen, will end chronic inflation, money-driven boom and bust cycles, and their economic and financial crises. It will prevent states from spinning out of control, from becoming ever more powerful at the expense of civil and entrepreneurial liberties. A free market in money will preserve and restore individual liberties and freedoms, enhance the wealth of the nations, and make the world more peaceful. And with that, I hope my remarks have been encouraging and inspiring for you and increased interest in Hayek's idea of denationalizing money in creating a free market in money. Thank you very much for your attention.